Hey, what is happening everyone? Welcome back to another video, and yes, at this point I think it is safe to say that it is tablet week. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So today we have the Jumper EZBook 6 Plus, and this is yet another Windows tablet. It's got an 11.6-inch 1080p IPS panel, 64GB of built-in storage, 6GB of RAM, and the trusty Intel Celeron N3450, which is pretty decent. It's got a pretty good battery life for a Windows tablet, and some stuff that we're going to be talking about in just a bit. So first of all, this is the box that it comes in. It's nothing special. It comes in this foam piece right here, which inside you'll find the tablet and the charging adapter that runs at 12 volts 2 amps. That has this type of connection. On the front, we got a badly pre-installed screen protector, so let's go ahead and take it off. It's full of bubbles and dust particles right under it, and it seems like it's a pretty good screen. Ouch. Ow, 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 ow. But not only that, it's a screen protector that is pretty easy to scratch up. So once again, this is a 1080p 11.6-inch IPS panel, and on the front what we have is a home button and dual front-facing speakers, which are actually unobtrusive, and they sound pretty decent for a tablet. Now yes, the tablet does have some pretty thick bezels, so you don't block your screen when watching a video or reading a document, so your fingers are usually out of the way. On the front we got a front-facing camera, and on the back we actually have just a black blob. There's actually no back camera, but not like you're going to be using that anyways. Maybe once in the lifetime of this tablet. And in the back, you'll also get some protectors, some film protectors that you can take off, which are nice in keeping this tablet nice and clean. And here's where you'll find the Jumper logo and the Intel Inside logo, and 2 notches on both ends to open up the angle adjustment panel. So here are the angle adjustments that you can do, and these are the 2 main ones right here, and then you close it up. And of course, you can go in between, but you just have to kind of adjust it yourself and get it at the right precision. Now with the maximum extension, it's actually pretty good. It faces you very well. And overall, I think it works pretty well. And if you have the tablet placed at an eye level, then you can also go for the first adjustment, which will narrow the angle for you, which is pretty good. Now inside you'll get the usual SD card slot, which runs at USB 2.0 speeds, which I have tested with this Samsung 64GB Evo. And this closes up just like so. Very simple and straightforward, and it does seem like they had an idea of actually adding some kind of SIM card or another SD card. Who knows, maybe we'll see that in the next revision. On the bottom, we got the magnetic dock for the optional keyboard that we're going to be taking a look at in just a bit. And on the right side, you'll find a full-size USB port, a micro HDMI port, and the charging port. Now, something that you will notice here is that the casing is actually cracked around these edges, and this is a pretty weak point. In fact, you can actually lift this and almost just break it off completely. But moving on to the left side, we got the volume rockers, a micro USB OTG port, where you can get an additional USB port, a 3.5mm headphone jack, and the power button right on top of the left side. And that's all you get for this tablet. Now let's go ahead and quickly take a look at the optional keyboard cover, which has a touchpad. First of all, let's go ahead and take apart this touchpad protector. And here is what it looks like. So at a glance, it has pretty much everything that you'd need. It's got MIDI keys on the top, including brightness and volume controls. We got a pretty decent arrow key and a quick touchpad enable disable key right here, which can get pretty handy when you have an external mouse or you want to type something without your hands getting in the way of the keyboard. You can easily disable it with a single key without having to do some finger acrobatics. The keys have some pretty decent travel distance, which actually feels pretty good. The spacing on the hand is a bit too tight, so it'll take some time to get used to when typing on this keyboard. Here's what it sounds like. And finally, this is how it clips on. It basically clips on with the magnetic dock on the bottom, and there you go, you're in tablet mode. And if you want, you can actually push this up and get some elevation, get an angle at this keyboard, and start working with it. And now let's go ahead and move on to the software, starting with the storage speeds of the eMMC storage and the SD card slot. So on the left, we have the eMMC storage, 64GB in total, and here are the speeds. They could be better. Read speeds are pretty okay for an eMMC storage, but that's that. So it does boot up, things do launch pretty quickly. You get what you get for what it is. It's not an SSD, it's an eMMC. And then moving on to the right side with the SD card slot, it's nothing to be surprised about. It is running at USB 2.0 speeds, and I have yet to actually see a USB 3.0 card reader on one of these tablets. Hopefully we'll see one this year. And a quick look at the device manager, we can see that the storage device is actually a SanDisk. But what's more important, if we go ahead and move on down here, it's actually running a Realtek Wi-Fi chip instead of an Intel. And not only that, it's actually a single band 2.4 GHz Wi-Fi network. So to put it simply, we don't have 5 GHz Wi-Fi or AC Wi-Fi, which is actually a bummer, especially for a tablet like this. And especially for 2017/2018, that something like this is missing from a tablet. And you can see right here, of course, it's 2.4 GHz. It's going to be a huge bottleneck. These are the speeds that you can expect from this laptop being in the same room as the Wi-Fi network. And a quick look at the RAM in the Task Manager, we can see that it is running at 1600 MHz. Now, all that's left to do is to actually go ahead and take a look at the performance, playing games, doing some light photo editing, and testing out the speaker. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so at this point I would be showing you some online gaming and showing you a couple of games here and there, but unfortunately I simply cannot launch and run some of the games to play online because Steam is offline, and Steam is offline because the Wi-Fi is not connecting. And what do you know, it just connected. Someone just messaged me on Steam and it seems like it's working. And the reason I think the Wi-Fi is starting to mess up is probably because I'm running off the USB. And my guess is that the USB power is being shared by the Wi-Fi module. Let's just go ahead and run a game and see what happens if it disconnects once again. So let's go ahead and do Dust 2 with 24 players online. Alright, here we go. So we are getting about 78, 70, 71 FPS, 70 FPS. And we are finally online. Now, it may disconnect at any point. I'm not too sure. So right now we're running at 720p, lowest settings, and here's what it looks like right now. It looks pretty good, obviously, but the FPS is not very stable. If you're doing competitive gaming, I mean, don't do it. But if you just want some casual gaming here and there, then you can run Counter-Strike. Anything more like Rocket League, just simply forget it. It's going to run terribly, like 12 FPS. I've tried it. Just some old games, Half-Life games, Source games, and retro games. And what do you know, the Wi-Fi has disconnected again. Now, it shows it is connected, but the connection is simply not there. Nothing is going through. So let's see if my guess is right. If you go ahead and disconnect all the USB devices, so I'm running the OTG for the mouse, and a small SSD on the full-sized, and it seems like it's coming back. Okay, so I'm guessing somewhat right. Let's see if we can actually run anything here. See if we can play anything. Yep. Depending on what you connect to these USB ports, the Wi-Fi will actually start having issues. And again, my guess is that the USBs here are actually sharing the power with the Wi-Fi module, which is pretty stupid. And on top of that, the Wi-Fi is already 2.4 gigahertz, so it doesn't help that you get no Wi-Fi too. So let's go ahead and take a listen and see what these speakers sound like here. Alright, so right now we're running at 4K, and anything below 4K obviously is going to run at full speed. And right now, what's not running at full speed is of course the Wi-Fi, because we're connected to 2.4 gigahertz. So if you do plan to have some 4K footage, then you can easily play it with this laptop, as long as you get the connection. Maybe you can get an Ethernet cable. And we'll talk about what is the best alternative to this thing right here. Now, taking a quick look back at the display here, although it has some pretty good viewing angles and overall it looks pretty good, it does have some major light bleed issues. And you can see in the bottom right corner, I have tried to match the camera settings with what I see in real life, so it looks more realistic. And yeah, it's actually that severe. It's very visible on a black canvas or a black display. In my opinion, that's some very severe backlight bleed. Now, speaking of the display here, we can actually use a Stylus Pen even though it's not advertised to. It seems like they are using some kind of panel that is shared with other tablets. Basically, what I have in my hands here is a tech class Stylus Pen. Now, no, this is not a pressure sensitive pen. It's just the type that charges and simply draws on the screen with no pressure sensitivity. Now, does it work? Well, it actually works fairly well, and it's very responsive, which is surprising. And I can definitely enjoy a Stylus Pen like this, even though it doesn't have any pressure sensitivity. But overall, it's very responsive in that regards. But that doesn't help the tablet here, because there are a few other flaws that we're going to be talking about. So the conclusion here, what do I think about this tablet, and should you get it? Well, first let's take a look at the pros and cons. First of all, the display here, overall, it does look pretty nice. It's pretty big, it's got a 1080p resolution, it's IPS, and overall the colors look pretty good. But it has light bleed, and the brightness is not that bright. And no, it does not have any ghosting, which is a good thing. The speakers here are front-facing speakers, and they do sound pretty okay and decent, but they do leave some stuff to be desired when it comes to volume. The selection of ports that we have here is not very generous. It's actually pretty small. It's not a whole lot, and it's actually very minimal. All we really have is an OTG port, a headphone jack, a micro HDMI, and a full-size USB port that is already cracked out of the box. Charging options are very limited considering what other tablets can do. The only way you can charge this tablet is through this port right here, which is not very convenient. And speaking of limited ports, it seems like when we connect some USB devices, like my SSD right here, or anything for that matter, like a mouse, it seems like it actually affects the Wi-Fi, and it disconnects the Wi-Fi, and we end up with no internet. And speaking of the internet, we only have 2.4 GHz. It's actually quite disappointing. Lastly, performance for what the CPU is, it's pretty okay. It's not that bad. It performs like you'd expect. It's got a pretty decent amount of RAM, and really not a whole lot of storage, but that's okay since you have an SD card slot, even though it's USB 2.0. But that is a given for multiple tablets out there. And lastly, when it comes to heat, this tablet does get warm, even though it is pretty chunky, and you would expect it not to have that much. It does get pretty warm on the front and the back when you play games, and that is that. Now, something we haven't talked about yet is actually battery life. So battery life here, we can get 4 hours and 20 minutes of video playback at 1080p full brightness using VLC. It's a local file being played off a tablet, and we get 4 hours and 20 minutes. Charging time takes about 2.5 hours, which is standard for these kind of tablets. And with that, the conclusion. Should I recommend this tablet? Definitely not. You probably already guessed it. What do I recommend instead of this? Well, surprisingly, the chewy Surbook Mini. Not the full-size Surbook, but the Surbook Mini. And that is because the Surbook Mini has a smaller display, but most importantly, it is running a 1080p display. If you guys know, Chewy likes to put really high-resolution displays on their tablets, and it pretty much hinders and kills all performance that is left on the puny N3450 CPUs that they like to put on their tablets and laptops. That one also has a USB Type-C they can charge with. It has more ports. It is overall a much better tablet. It has dual band Wi-Fi and a whole lot of things that this tablet has issues with. Either way, the last time I checked, the price on the Surbook Mini is much better considering what you get. And one last thing before we go, the keyboard here, I definitely don't recommend it if you still want to get the tablet, and that is because of the simple key right here. When you press this key, it will simply lock your tablet. So if you're working and you accidentally press this key right here, then your tablet will simply shut off and lock itself or go into sleep mode. And that's probably going to get very frustrating really quickly if you end up doing that very often. And the touchpad here is actually not that responsive. It has a bunch of gestures that get in the way. You can't really tap and drag at the same time. You gotta stop and then drag. It's a really messy touchpad. Definitely don't recommend it. Overall, this is going for around $45 or so. I probably don't recommend getting it. It is simply full of problems, and the only thing that you're going to be enjoying out of this keyboard is the keyboard part, except for this part and this part, because these things right here are going to simply get in the way of your experience. And yeah, that is actually pretty much for this video. So thank you all for watching. Hope you have enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe for content like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, everyone.